In fact, I was dismissed from the meeting about 3 minutes after it began. They claimed that I was incompetent and hence out of place. What did you just say? My voice rose in incredulity as I couldn't contain my shock at such a ridiculous statement. My face was flushed with rage as I heard the specifics of their conversation. I hastily took out my phone and dialed a specific number after she had finished telling me what had happened. Hi there. I appreciate your time. I'm sorry to have interrupted, but I'll get right to the point. The $70 million contract is being canceled. I said it bluntly and ended the call without waiting for a reply. Every fiber in my body was fueled by the rage that erupted from my subordinate being humiliated. John is my name. I work for Clean Industries in the sales division, and I'm 36 years old. I have a hectic life, from negotiating with clients to working at my desk. Having worked for the company for more than 10 years, I now also teach new hires, with an emphasis on nurturing younger talent. I went over the reference materials because I was tasked with mentoring one of our staff members this year. Emma is her name. She is really beautiful, with warm, expressive eyes and straight black hair. She exudes an atmosphere that makes others stop and think twice, almost like she's an actress or famous person. But her looks wasn't the only factor in her hiring. Despite just being in her 3rd year, she has already showed promise with her novel perspectives and useful suggestions. She struggles to speak up, though, because she is a little reticent, which is a minor disadvantage. To help her develop and gain confidence via experience, she has been placed under a mid-level employee like me. Emma once asked me for advice a few days prior to a meeting with Morgan Manufacturing, one of our biggest clients. I find myself questioning whether a young person like me should be managing such a significant client. Someone with greater expertise, like you, John, ought to be in command, in my opinion. Morgan Manufacturing is well known in our sector, despite not being a household name. Emma's concern was understandable, but in my opinion, it was time for her to take on bigger clients. Don't be concerned. If something comes up, I'll be there to help. You have a tendency to undervalue yourself, yet you were trusted with this task because of your abilities, so have some faith in yourself. John, if you say so, I'll try my hardest. Could you accompany me in reviewing the materials? Emma looked up at me and smiled shyly as she talked. I smiled back and nodded, then started going over the papers Emma had brought. As scheduled, Emma went to Morgan Manufacturing with her colleague and predecessor, Sam, on the day of the meeting. Andrew, the client representative, is renowned for his kind manner and friendly disposition. I was sure Emma could perform without being overly anxious because Andrew was her counterpart. After giving things some thought, I returned to my desk's routine tasks. However, I heard a familiar voice behind me as I took a quick look at the first document. Excuse me. I messed up. What happened, Emma? Have you forgotten anything? Emma, who ought to have been at the client meeting, was standing in front of my desk looking sad. A few seconds after the meeting was supposed to begin, I checked the time out of habit. Emma only chewed her lip as I watched, perplexed and anxious, wondering if she had forgotten something or was feeling ill. Her face was hazy with sorrow. The mood was oppressive, and I braced myself, knowing that something unexpected had obviously happened. Can you tell me what happened? Emma gave me a confused, nearly defenseless look. She hesitated for a moment before speaking, her voice unsure and sluggish. I was actually dismissed from the meeting 3 minutes after it began. They claimed that I was incompetent and hence out of place. What did you just say? My voice rose in surprise at such a startling revelation, and I was unable to contain it. My cheeks was flushed with rage as I listened to the in-depth details of the conversation with the client. I tried to control my roiling anger by taking several deep breaths when she was done. The rage of being insulted without even being given a chance to reply, however, still pulsated through me like a roaring magma river. It was my fault, really. John, please, it's okay. No way, Emma, you did nothing wrong. I reassured her by nodding, but all it did was make her paler, her terrified eyes staring at me. But, your face. I took a drink of coffee, wondering what she was talking about, and suddenly I understood. I looked like some sort of devil, my face reflected on the coffee's surface, teeth clenched, eyes wide with rage. I turned my back on Emma and inhaled deeply. I knew it wouldn't help her if I acted out of anger, because I was her boss. By the time I lifted my coffee cup again, my reflection had returned to its usual calm expression. After finishing my coffee, I immediately pulled out my phone and dialed a certain number. After a few rings, I heard the faint click of the call connecting. Hello. Thank you for taking the call. I'll get straight to the point. We're canceling the $70 million contract. Without waiting for a response, I hung up. Then, feeling calm, I made my way leisurely to the break room for another coffee. Suddenly, I heard Emma jogging to catch up behind me. John, what was that call about? Did you say $70 million? Who were you talking to? Oh, I called Mr. Morgan, the president of Morgan Manufacturing. I decided we can't trust him with a $70 million contract anymore. Hearing this, Emma went pale, her breath catching. It was understandable. Morgan Manufacturing is one of our largest clients. Canceling a deal that big must seem unimaginable to her. Seeing the worry and confusion spreading across her face, I realized she wouldn't be able to focus on work without a full explanation, so I reluctantly began explaining everything. After I shared a bit about my position, Emma's eyes widened even more. She covered her mouth with her hands as though suppressing a scream. I couldn't blame her. It was a lot to take in. But her curiosity soon replaced the earlier fear and guilt, her eyes bright with interest. It seemed she'd stopped blaming herself, which was a relief. I relaxed as I recalled the incident she had described. Emma said everything started off smoothly, with friendly greetings as planned. Her predecessor, Sam, introduced her to the client representative, Andrew. True to his reputation, Andrew was a polite man who made an effort to put Emma at ease, helping her to relax for the meeting. This deal is truly exciting. Our president, Mr. Morgan, is very enthusiastic about it and looks forward to further discussions with you, Emma. We're equally honored to have this connection with your company and look forward to working together. Emma and Sam both bowed deeply. Just as they were about to begin the main discussion, the conference room doors suddenly swung open. As Emma and the others turned their surprised gazes toward it, they saw a man in his 40s standing there, arms crossed, and wearing a smug, unpleasant grin. Without knocking, the man barged into the room, leaving Emma confused. Sam and Andrew looked equally stunned. Is something the matter, Thomas? What's with the rookie? The man called Thomas ignored the question and instead began scrutinizing Emma from head to toe. Judging by the manager title on his badge and the way Andrew responded to him, it was clear Thomas was in a higher position. Emma stood there, shocked that someone with such a rude attitude could be a manager. Thomas started speaking unilaterally. I heard today's meeting was with some tiny local factory. How short-staffed must they be, sending a rookie like her to handle a company of our scale? Are they mocking us? No, actually these representatives err. Andrew tried to explain, but Thomas waved his hand dismissively, silencing him. Then he plopped into the chair across from Emma. Without hesitation, he grabbed the materials Emma had prepared and began flipping through them with a look of disdain. Emma and Sam exchanged glances. Their company was no small local factory, but a reputable industrial firm, hardly deserving of such a label. Even if they were a small operation, there was no reason to be looked down upon. After all, whether big or small, companies in manufacturing share the same commitment to craftsmanship. Small factories can tackle projects that big corporations might not manage, so there's no reason for either to act superior. Feeling an undercurrent of discomfort, Emma thought it best to resolve the situation calmly. She assumed there had been some misunderstanding and began, "Excuse me, but—" But before she could finish, the real trouble began. How could anyone expect a real deal with some local factory girl? "Incompetents are out of place here," Thomas sneered. As he finished saying this, the sharp sound of tearing paper filled the room. To her shock, Thomas had ripped up the materials and business card Emma had prepared. In the silence that followed, fragments of the torn contract floated to the floor, scattered in shreds across the carpet. Andrew stared in disbelief, his mouth hanging open as he glanced between Thomas and the shredded papers. Emma and Sam were equally shaken, their gaze fixed on Thomas, who seemed oblivious to the shock around him. Instead, he crossed his arms with a smug expression and looked at Emma with a self-satisfied smirk as she stood there, pale and paralyzed. "Thomas, these aren't the people you think. The meeting with the local factory is tomorrow. These representatives are from Clean Industries." "What? Clean Industries? You mean that well-known manufacturing company?" At the mention of the company's name, Thomas stiffened, his face twisting with embarrassment. But he quickly regained his arrogant posture, pointing his chin dismissively toward Emma. "In that case, it's even more insulting. Surely there were better people they could have sent. Sending someone this young is an insult." With that, he practically shoved Emma out of the conference room, abruptly ending the meeting. Barging into a meeting uninvited and mistaking us for a different client is just unacceptable. Furthermore, dismissing Emma solely because of her youth and gender, assuming she's not worth speaking to, is simply out of line. Thomas would certainly face consequences for this behavior. With that thought in mind, I took a sip of my freshly brewed coffee. The situation shifted within just an hour. I was informed that 2 representatives from Morgan Manufacturing had arrived, and I stood up, anticipating their visit. Summoning Emma, we slowly made our way to the reception room where Mr. Morgan, the president of Morgan Manufacturing, was waiting with a pale face. A man in his 40s, standing next to him with a disgruntled, sulky expression, reluctantly bowed his head to me. This man was probably Thomas. Despite reaching a managerial position in his 40s, a sign of considerable ability, there was no sense of vigor in Thomas's demeanor. In fact, his entire attitude exuded irritation, as if he couldn't fathom why he should apologize. But Mr. Morgan ignored Thomas's behavior entirely, bowing repeatedly as soon as he saw me. "I deeply apologize for my subordinate's rudeness today. We are sincerely sorry." "Please, raise your head," I urged, but he wouldn't listen, saying, "I cannot possibly raise my head. I must apologize for our mismanagement." Thomas appeared thoroughly confused by the sight of his company's president apologizing so fervently, his brow furrowing in bewilderment. "As much as you say that, isn't your apology misdirected? With this misunderstanding still unaddressed, we're getting nowhere." At my firm response, Mr. Morgan, now pale, finally raised his head, looking at me with a nervous expression. He awaited my next words. "To confirm, the reason for your visit today is due to the incident earlier, correct?" As I asked this, Thomas's eyebrow twitched. Ignoring the simmering glare he directed at me, I continued speaking. "So you're Thomas. Have you explained what happened earlier to Mr. Morgan?" At my question, Thomas scowled, clearly annoyed, and instead shot back with a question of his own. Who exactly are you anyway? I'm being dragged here by Mr. Morgan, and it's honestly a bit inconvenient." "Thomas, just what do you think you're saying?" Mr. Morgan immediately started to reprimand Thomas, visibly flustered. But Thomas only pouted and continued to glare at me. "I'll explain who I am later. For now, can you answer my question?" When I pressed him again, Thomas reluctantly began to speak. "Well, I already told Mr. Morgan it was just a small misunderstanding on my part. Honestly, it's your employee who left abruptly. If anything, I'd like to know what happened on your end," he muttered, scratching his head and muttering under his breath. "What a hassle." It was clear he was trying to dodge responsibility for his actions, perhaps thinking he could get away with it. Though his attitude infuriated me, I held my temper and continued. Then allow me to go over the details myself. With that, I recounted the events as Emma had described them, this time in front of Mr. Morgan. Just as planned, we were having our meeting when Thomas suddenly barged in without so much as a proper greeting. He tore up the materials and business card Emma had prepared. I described how he mistook our company for a small-town factory and repeatedly made derogatory remarks about such companies. As I went on, Mr. Morgan's face flushed with anger. Yet even after hearing all this, Thomas remained unperturbed, casually remarking, "Oh, that's all." "Really?" Followed by a small click of his tongue. It was simply a bit of a misunderstanding, a difference in perspective, if you will. I reviewed the materials, and because they were prepared by a young employee with only a few years of experience, they were honestly quite lacking. He said, glancing at Emma with a condescending smile. So I pointed that out and, doing her a favor, tore them up so she could redo them from scratch. But she ran off crying. Really, it seems she's a bit immature as a professional. Even now, Thomas was twisting the story to suit his narrative. At this point, I was beyond anger, feeling more disbelief at his refusal to admit his wrongdoing. But this was no time to let up on holding him accountable. "So that's your version of events, is it?" "It's not a version, it's the truth. Clearly, that employee over there just spun her story to suit herself." Thomas looked around the room with a smug grin. I kept my gaze fixed on him, who maintained a smug, confident demeanor, assuming there was no evidence. Without looking away, I called out to Emma. "Emma, let's clarify exactly what happened. Could you bring that out?" Emma nodded quietly and placed a voice recorder on the table. Thomas looked shocked at the unexpected appearance of the recorder, exclaiming, "What? What is that? Don't tell me you were recording this meeting. That's a violation of privacy." "You might not have known, Thomas, since you joined midway through the meeting, but recording was pre-approved," I replied calmly. Thomas finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation, clenching his teeth in frustration. "If what you said matched Emma's account, we wouldn't have needed to bring this out. But it seems your story doesn't quite line up with the report I received." "That? I mean, surely there's no need to actually listen to it," Thomas stammered, sweating visibly. He offered a weak protest, but I pressed the play button on the recorder without hesitation. I thought it best for Mr. Morgan to hear the content as well, for clarity. Thomas's mouth opened and closed as he struggled to form words, utterly speechless. Meanwhile, the voice recorder began to faithfully replay the earlier exchange. In just those brief 3 minutes, a stream of insults from Thomas played back, leaving Mr. Morgan visibly trembling with anger, too furious to even speak. Although Emma had given me a summary, hearing the sound of the contract being torn filled me with a fresh surge of anger. Thomas, seeing Mr. Morgan's reaction, finally dropped his head in defeat. "I deeply apologize for my conduct, but as you can hear in the recording, it was just an honest mistake." "A mistake, you say?" Thomas gave a forced smile, trying to gauge my reaction. "It was just a minor communication error. I mixed up this company with a small-town factory scheduled for the next day." The once confident Thomas, who had been so condescending earlier, now looked back and forth between Mr. Morgan and me, bowing repeatedly, his tone entirely submissive. Thomas's overly submissive performance was almost comical, and I found myself shaking my head. "Thomas, you may say that, but calling it a mistake isn't enough to justify what we've endured," I said. "I'm sorry." His apology was cut off by my unyielding smile, and frustration quickly crept across his face. "Even after I apologized, you're still pushing this? Who do you think you were to speak to me like that?" Thomas, ignoring Mr. Morgan's near-desperate reprimand, grew even more obstinate. "Mr. Morgan, this is what happens when you keep apologizing. They take advantage. Cancel a $70 million contract. Who gives some employee like him that kind of authority? Because I have full authority over that contract, granted by my father, President Kingston. At this revelation, Thomas's mouth fell open, his eyes wide with surprise. It was clear he hadn't considered that I might be more than just a regular employee. What? Neither your representatives nor that woman said anything about that. If I'd known, I wouldn't have acted like that, I swear. Of course I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want special treatment just because I'm the president's son. Thomas's strength seemed to abandon him, and he collapsed onto the sofa, mumbling feebly, "Please, I truly didn't know. I'll never act that way again. So just this once." He muttered those words almost like delirious rambling. Ignoring the shock on Thomas's face, I turned my gaze toward Emma with a determined expression. She gave me a deep nod and stepped forward. Our distrust of Thomas stems not only from how he treated me, but from his entire attitude. Thinking it's acceptable to treat our company with respect simply because of our status while dismissing a smaller company is a serious problem in itself. Emma's words perfectly echoed my own feelings. Emma had always been modest and lacked confidence in herself, but now she was boldly expressing her opinions to Thomas. Her shoulders trembled slightly, but she finished her statement unwaveringly. I nodded to Emma a few times, conveying my appreciation for her hard work. Then, standing directly in front of Thomas, I looked down at him intently. Realizing the gravity of his actions, he turned pale, his knees trembling. "So, we will proceed with canceling the $70 million contract." No. My words seemed to crush Thomas, his expression that of a man facing judgment. Beside him, Mr. Morgan held his head in his hands, glaring at Thomas. Finally, Mr. Morgan spoke, his voice sharp with anger. "I've covered for you countless times, but enough is enough." Mr. Morgan's usual calm demeanor had vanished, his fury unmistakable. Just seeing this made it easy to imagine how much trouble Thomas had caused over the years. Every employee here understands the extent to which our company owes Clean Industries and, by extension, Mr. Kingston. I don't know or care about that. You're all making such a big deal over torn documents. Can't you just print new copies? Cornered, Thomas now turned his frustration toward us. Yes, I may have behaved poorly earlier, and for that, I apologize. I'm sorry, all right. I'd assure you I've learned my lesson. Though he used the words of an apology, his tone was petulant, as if he were a teenager. He exaggeratedly bowed, then looked back at Emma and me with a smug, self-satisfied grin. His arrogance left no doubt that he wasn't truly sorry. "I have no interest in accepting such a shallow apology," I said. "Jan is absolutely right," Mr. Morgan agreed. Putting Thomas in a position of responsibility simply because he's related to the founder was a mistake. Almost as if he couldn't stand to look at him anymore, Mr. Morgan covered his face with his hands. It was clear Thomas had been brought in through a connection that Mr. Morgan couldn't refuse. While nepotism alone isn't always wrong, a person like Thomas shouldn't be leading anyone. Mr. Morgan turned back to us, bowing deeply once again. "I truly apologize for everything that's happened. Rest assured, Thomas will face appropriate disciplinary action." Next to Mr. Morgan, who was repeatedly apologizing, Thomas stood with his eyes wide open in shock. Having always used his family ties to his advantage, it was clear he'd never considered that he might one day face real consequences for his actions. Thomas sat there, eyes blinking rapidly, utterly speechless. Meanwhile, Mr. Morgan bowed deeply once again, his expression strained. "On top of everything, it may be selfish of me to ask, but could you reconsider the contract? Please, just one more chance for our company." His earnest apology made my heart ache. I held no hard feelings toward Mr. Morgan personally. In fact, his dedication to treating his employees with respect and warmth, almost like family, was close to the ideal of what I thought a leader should be. That was why I had proposed the $70 million contract with Morgan Manufacturing. Their work and reputation were impeccable. The problem lay solely with Thomas. And Thomas, oblivious to the gravity of his actions, simply muttered to himself, "A punishment. Me? Why should I be the one to suffer here?" Seeing his self-centered behavior, I couldn't help but sigh. Mr. Morgan had been sincerely apologizing for the situation, but Thomas was the root cause here. Thomas flinched, looking up at me with a fearful expression. His concern was solely for his own status and security. With a calm but firm tone, I continued, "Thomas, do you only apologize when forced?" I have no interest in maintaining any relationship with a company that employs someone like that. Beside me, Emma nodded repeatedly. As a dedicated and hard-working individual, she couldn't stand someone like Thomas, who had recklessly interfered with her work and nearly ruined a significant contract. Seeing even young Emma looking at Thomas with such disdain seemed to solidify Mr. Morgan's decision. After a brief, pained expression crossed his face, he shook his head as if clearing his mind. Then, with a firm voice, he spoke to Thomas. "Your actions have severely damaged our company's reputation. Be prepared to take full responsibility for this." "What? A punishment? You mean a demotion? Or, I won't be fired, will I?" Finally grasping the severity of the situation, Thomas's face paled with worry. It was clear that until now, Mr. Morgan or other influential people had managed to smooth things over whenever he caused problems. But now, seeing the severity in Mr. Morgan's face, he seemed to grasp the reality for the first time. Thomas abandoned his arrogant demeanor and dropped to the floor in a deep bow. Only now, under threat, did he finally choose to apologize. "I sincerely apologize. I truly regret my actions." His tone sounded genuine for once, but it only filled me with disappointment. Why hadn't he shown this remorse from the beginning? No, if he were the type to apologize, he wouldn't have shown such rude behavior in the first place. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes for a moment, and steadied myself. Then, calm and collected, I delivered my final decision to Mr. Morgan and Thomas. "I hear your apology, but it doesn't change the fact that Emma was dismissed from the meeting partway through. I can't, in good conscience, continue this partnership as things stand." Immediately, both Mr. Morgan and Thomas slumped in defeat, looking more like they had collapsed onto the floor than bowed. Addressing them, I continued with a gentle but resolute tone, "Regardless, I'll inform my father of everything that's happened here. Please await his response." "No. Please, I beg you, don't cancel the contract. If word gets out that I cost the company $70 million, I'll be fired." Together with Emma, who had been quietly observing the situation, I left the meeting room. Up until the moment the door closed, Thomas's pitiful shouts echoed through the quiet office. Afterward, I took Emma with me to personally report the situation to my father. Though initially nervous about meeting him, she soon launched into a clear and confident explanation, outlining everything that had transpired. It was obvious that this experience had instilled in her a sense of responsibility and perspective on professional relationships. Emma's rapid growth was perhaps the only positive outcome from this ordeal. After that, my father arranged a discussion with Mr. Morgan, and they decided to move forward with a conditional contract. The agreed-upon condition was that no more misguided employees like Thomas would ever be assigned as representatives in the future. Though I thought it was a rather lenient resolution, Mr. Morgan chose to go a step further. He terminated Thomas on the spot. It seemed that following the incident, investigations uncovered a long history of Thomas's misconduct. Mr. Morgan had only been aware of a fraction of the problems. It turned out Thomas had driven talented young employees to quit and offended clients with unprofessional behavior, leading to lost contracts. It was clear now that some of our struggles were directly tied to Thomas's actions. He had even driven away some of our most promising talent and damaged our standing with valuable clients. After a long time, I met with Mr. Morgan, who let out a tired sigh before bowing his head to me. Because of everything, I caused you a lot of trouble this time, John. Despite that, you still went through with the $70 million contract, and I truly can't thank you enough. If our company were to withdraw, Morgan Manufacturing would likely face significant losses. At worst, they could even face the threat of bankruptcy. It was clear they would be even more reliant on us moving forward. But I shook my head slowly and extended my hand to Mr. Morgan. We all need support at some point. I have deep respect for you, Mr. Morgan. You never stopped putting your employees first. Thank you, John. Truly, thank you. With tears in his eyes, Mr. Morgan, who was old enough to be my father, clutched my hand. He had made the mistake of supporting someone like Thomas, but everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what you do once you realize them. We shook hands firmly, committing ourselves to the success of our future dealings. As for Thomas, life was rough for him after his dismissal. Due to his poor character, he had been shuffled around related companies before, but this time he was completely cut off. Even his family disowned him, severing all ties. For years, he had relied on others to clean up his messes, but with no support left, he scrambled to find a new job only to be rejected everywhere. By then, he had never actually put in honest work and had developed a reputation for his attitude and behavior. He burned through his savings in no time, put his house up as collateral, and eventually disappeared. The last I heard, there were rumors he was seen scavenging in trash bins in a rundown neighborhood, but there's been no word of him since. As for me, I continued my work without interruption. I was wrapping up a rotation through various departments in preparation for becoming the next president, with my current role in sales being my final stop. Starting next year, I was told I'd be working closer to my father as vice president. One day, I called Emma into my office. I need a capable and trustworthy assistant by my side. How about it? Would you work with me? Yes, I will do everything in my power to support you. Emma firmly nodded at my proposal. Gone was the hesitant young employee who once wavered in the face of responsibility. With her talent combined with newfound confidence, she'd be unstoppable. I'm certain she'll become a vital asset to our company's future. With that hope in my heart, I stepped into the office once more. Supporting each other not only in the workplace, but also in life was still a few years away for Emma and me.